Absolutely fascinating. Professor Orion's Starshade's 3 pairs of eyes widened as she pressed her face against the observation glass. Her iridescent scales shimmered under the harsh laboratory lights as she watched their newest research participant through the reinforced window. "Have you ever seen anything quite like it?" Senior researcher Lyra Nightglow clicked her mandibles in disapproval. "Please maintain professional distance, Professor. Need I remind you, this is a class for potentially dangerous specimen." Behind them, Junior Analyst Nova Sunspark nervously adjusted his protective suit. The readings are unusual to say the least. Their cellular structure shouldn't be able to support such complex functions. Yet here we are. The specimen in question sat calmly in the white-walled secure area chamber, a human female who had identified herself as Celeste Morgan. She appeared to be reading a book they had provided, occasionally turning pages with her peculiarly flexible 5-digit appendages. "Look how inefficient their cooling system is," Eric's exclaimed, gesturing at the thermal imaging display. "They regulate temperature through liquid secretion. Primitive, yet somehow they've managed to become the dominant species on their world." Cora pulled up the preliminary analysis on her neural interface. "Their musculature is laughably weak compared to most spacefaring species. Their bones are brittle, skin poorly armored, sensory organs limited in range. By all accounts, they should have gone extinct millennia ago. Yet they didn't," Tuz murmured, studying the baseline readings. "And now they're spreading across their local star system at an alarming rate, which is precisely why the Council authorized this research." Cora reminded them, "We need to understand their limitations before they become a genuine concern. Their technology is advancing faster than anticipated." Inside the chamber, Celeste Morgan turned another page, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "The specimen has been remarkably cooperative," Eric's noted, checking her data tablet. "Almost too cooperative, don't you think?" Cora waved a dismissive appendage. "They're not as cognitively developed as initial reports suggested. The subject likely doesn't comprehend the full scope of our research. Tomorrow we begin the actual testing protocol. I've reviewed the planned experiments," Tuz said, his scales shifting to a worried pale blue. "Are we certain about the intensity levels? The simulations suggest their physiology shouldn't be able to handle." "The simulations account for their known limitations," Cora interrupted. "We'll start with basic endurance trials and work our way up. Nothing too strenuous for such a fragile species." Celeste Morgan glanced up from her book, her eyes meeting Cora's directly through the observation window. For just a moment, Tuz could have sworn he saw amusement in those alien eyes. "Remarkable how they function with only 2 optical organs, isn't it?" Eric's mused, completely missing the exchange. "Their entire sensory system seems like a rough prototype rather than a finished design, which makes their technological achievements all the more concerning," Cora replied. "If they can accomplish so much with such limited capabilities, imagine what they might achieve if they continue to develop. The Council is right to want more data." Tuz watched as Nash returned to her book, but something about her posture had changed. There was a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before, a subtle shift that his species' instincts recognized as a predator preparing to strike. "I think," he began hesitantly, "perhaps we should review the security protocols one more time before." "Your concern is noted," Junior Analyst Cora cut him off. "But remember your place. This facility was designed to contain specimens far more dangerous than a single human. The testing will proceed as scheduled." As the senior staff filed out of the observation room, Tuz lingered for a moment watching their subject. Nash closed her book and stretched, the motion reminding him of the hunting cats from his home world just before they pounced. Research log, term research Zenith 9, observation date 7249.4, beginning test series alpha, Cora Starwhisper announced, her voice echoing through the control room. Standard physical baseline assessment difficulty level set to minimal. Recording commencing. Celeste Morgan stood in the center of the testing chamber, now wearing the monitoring suit they'd provided. The silvery material clung to her form, covered in sensors that fed constant data streams to the research team's computers. First test, reaction speed, Eric's Moonweaver called out. Initiating stimulus sequence. Holographic targets appeared around the chamber, simple geometric shapes programmed to move at what the aliens considered a leisurely pace. Nash was instructed to touch as many as she could within the time limit. Remarkable, Taz Brightscale muttered, watching the readings. Her neural response time is far exceeding our projections. Nash moved through the space with fluid grace, each motion precise and economical. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The targets vanished beneath her touch one after another. Probably just beginner's luck, Cora dismissed, though her middle eyes narrowed slightly. Increased speed by 20%. Nash's performance only improved. Her movements became sharper, more focused, as if the higher difficulty had somehow made her more efficient rather than less. Implementing environmental variables, Eric's announced, excitement coloring her voice. Adjusting gravity simulation temperature gradient and atmospheric pressure, the chamber's conditions began to shift, creating what should have been challenging obstacles. Nash adapted instantly, adjusting her movements to compensate for each change without breaking stride. This shouldn't be possible, Taz said, his scales flickering with anxiety. According to our research, humans require significant adjustment periods for environmental changes. They're supposed to be highly sensitive to atmospheric variations. Perhaps our initial data was flawed, Cora suggested, but uncertainty had crept into her tone. Moved to endurance assessment, the chamber transformed into an obstacle course. Nash navigated it with almost contemptuous ease, her breathing barely elevated. When they added weighted resistance to her suit, she simply altered her technique using momentum and leverage in ways their simulations hadn't predicted. Professor, Taz called out, studying a secondary display. These readings, the subject's muscle efficiency is operating well beyond established human parameters. Nonsense, Cora snapped, but her confidence was visibly wavering. Their species barely understands their own biology. Our data is definitely more reliable than their primitive research. Nash completed another circuit, then paused, stretching casually. This is fun, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio pickups. But when do we start the actual testing? The research team exchanged worried glances. Subject Nash, Cora addressed her formally. These tests are carefully calibrated to push your species to its documented limits. Are you suggesting you're not experiencing any strain? Nash's smile reminded Taz of a predator again. Oh, I wouldn't say that, she replied cheerfully. I'm just curious about when we move past the warm-up exercises. Warm-up, Eric's scales paled. This course is designed to test the maximum capabilities of your data's wrong, Nash interrupted, still smiling. Seriously wrong. Want me to show you? Before anyone could respond, Nash launched into a series of movements that defied their understanding of human physicality. She scaled walls, executed perfect acrobatic maneuvers, and demonstrated strength that should have been impossible given their muscle density. Shut it down, Taz urged, his voice shaking. Something's not right here. No, Cora commanded, her scientific curiosity overtaking her caution. This is exactly what we need to document. Increase difficulty to maximum, all parameters. But the safety protocols, Taz protested, will hold, Cora insisted. This is a contained environment. We're in complete control. In the chamber, Nash had stopped moving. She stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly as she listened to their discussion through the speakers. Her smile had changed, becoming something that made Taz's ancestral survival instinct scream in warning. You know, Nash said conversationally, there's something your data's missing about humans. Want to know what it is? Eric's leaned forward eagerly. Yes, please. Any insights would be invaluable to our research. We're really good at playing along, Nash replied, reaching up to adjust her monitoring suit, right up until we decide not to. The sensor feed suddenly went dark. When they came back online a second later, every reading was normal, perfect, impossible, as if they were receiving exactly the data they expected to see, as if they had been all along. Professor, Taz whispered, his scales now completely white with fear. "I think we should end this session now." "Agreed," Cora said quietly, her earlier dismissiveness gone. Subject Nash, "Thank you for your cooperation. We'll resume testing tomorrow after we've analyzed today's data." "Oh no," Nash replied pleasantly. "I don't think we're done at all. In fact, I think it's time for my favorite part of the research." "Which is?" Eric's asked, scientific curiosity overwhelming common sense. Nash's smile grew wider. "The part where we find out who's really testing whom." He hurriedly dimmed the observation window and scurried after his colleagues, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that they were missing something vitally important. Behind him, in the quiet of her secure area chamber, Celeste Morgan began to hum a cheerful tune. Research log, Lunar Station Beta 459, observation date 7000 to 149.5. Security team standing by, Cora Star Whisper announced, her voice notably less confident than the previous day. Implementing enhanced secure area protocols, the testing chamber had been reinforced overnight. Additional force fields hummed with energy, and armed guards now lined the observation deck. Celeste Morgan stood in the center, looking thoroughly entertained by all the new security measures. "Beginning advanced trials," Eric's Moonweaver declared, trying to maintain professional detachment. "Subject Nash, please approach testing station 1. "Actually," Nash replied, examining her nails with exaggerated casualness, "I thought we might try something different today." Tuz Bright Scales monitoring equipment erupted with warnings. The chamber's environmental controls were changing, but not by their input. Temperature, pressure, gravity, everything was shifting in patterns that shouldn't have been possible from inside the secure area field. "How are you accessing our systems?" Cora demanded, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "This is a sealed network." Nash laughed, the sound echoing strangely through the chamber. "You really should have checked what I was actually reading in that book you gave me. Your coding language is fascinating, by the way. Very elegant, once you understand the basic patterns. She's been hacking our systems since day one." Tuz realized, scales shifting through patterns of terror and admiration. "Through the entertainment tablet's basic interface." "Correct," Nash beamed at him. "See, Tuz gets it. Now, about today's tests. I've designed a few of my own. Hope you don't mind." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a series of test parameters that made Eric's scales ripple with shock. "These calculations, they're operating on principles we've never even considered." "Impossible," Cora snapped, but her voice quavered. "Guard team, prepare to..." "Oh, they're taking a nice nap," Nash interrupted cheerfully. "Your sedative gas is very effective. Fortunately, my monitoring suit has excellent filtration capabilities. Once I reprogrammed it, of course." The sealed doors of the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss. Nash stood in the doorway, somehow having crossed the distance without any of their sensors detecting movement. "Now then," she said, pulling up a chair and sitting down casually among the terrified alien scientists. "Let's talk about your research parameters. I have some suggestions for improving your methodology. You're supposed to be a primitive species," Cora whispered, backing away slowly. "Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your physical capabilities are limited. Your cognitive functions are basic. But double quotes about that," Nash replied, spinning lazily in the chair. "Funny thing about humans, we've gotten really good at letting people underestimate us. Makes life more interesting." Tez's analytical mind was racing despite his fear. The cooperative behavior, the seemingly limited responses, the perfectly normal readings. "You were gathering data on us, smart boy," Nash grinned at him. "See, we discovered something important during our early space explorations. Sometimes the best way to study advanced civilizations is to let them think they're studying you." Eric's scientific curiosity finally overcame her terror. "But why, if you have these capabilities, why hide them?" "Because," Nash explained, pulling up complex strings of code on the main display with casual gestures, "it tells us everything we need to know about potential threats. For instance, I now have a complete understanding of your secure area protocols, weapons systems, and technical capabilities. You're not just a research participant, Cora realized, horror dawning in all 6 of her eyes. You're a military intelligence officer. Among other things, Nash agreed pleasantly. Though honestly, this was a pretty simple assignment. Most of your assumptions about human limitations come from outdated data, carefully curated to make us seem harmless. The station's lights flickered and new data began flooding the screens. Information about human achievements, capabilities, and advancements that shattered every preconception the alien scientists had held. This is what we actually are, Nash explained, gesturing at the displays. Not primitive, not limited, and definitely not harmless when threatened. Though I should thank you, your research facility has provided valuable insights into your species' technological capabilities. We're not a threat, Tuz said quickly, his analytical mind already processing the implications. This was purely scientific research, was it? Nash raised an eyebrow, because those strategic tool design files in your classified database suggest otherwise. Really interesting stuff, specifically targeted at what you thought were human weaknesses. Cora slumped in defeat. The Council will never believe this. Oh, they will, Nash assured her, still smiling that predatory smile. Because right now, similar scenes are playing out in research facilities across 12 different star systems. Humanity decided it was time to correct some misconceptions about our capabilities. We're converting it into a genuine research facility, one focused on actual collaborative science rather than weapons development. The aliens stared at their former research participant in stunned silence as the full magnitude of their miscalculation became clear. Now then, Nash said brightly, pulling up a new set of research protocols on the main screen. Who's ready to participate in some actually valuable scientific research? Don't worry, our testing methods are much more ethical than yours. We find that willing participants provide much better data. Research log, term research Zenith 9, observation date 7249.6. No. Cora Star Whisper's usual composure had completely shattered. Lock down the quantum core. She can't access those systems. Celeste Morgan watched the panicking aliens with an expression of mild amusement. You really shouldn't have built your secure area systems on quantum architecture. That's practically an invitation. The facility's lights pulsed with strange patterns as Nash's fingers danced across the control interfaces. Equations and schematics flashed across screens faster than alien eyes could process them. According to our data, humans shouldn't even be able to perceive quantum states, Eric's Moonweaver protested, her scientific worldview crumbling before her eyes. The neural pathways required, about that, Nash interrupted, bringing up a holographic display of human brain activity. Remember how I mentioned your data was wrong? Well, here's the really fun part. The display expanded, showing patterns of neural activity that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about human consciousness. Quantum entanglement patterns danced through ordinary synaptic functions, creating possibilities that should have been impossible. You see, Nash continued, as casual as if she were discussing the weather, humans didn't just develop technology. We evolved alongside it, changed ourselves, adapted. That's what we do best. Tuz Brightscale, watching from his corner, suddenly straightened. The testing protocols, they weren't about measuring human limits at all, were they? Give the junior analyst a prize, Nash beamed at him. You're absolutely right. This entire facility was designed to probe human capabilities for military applications, to find our weaknesses instead. The quantum core's secure area field flickered, then stabilized at a frequency that made the alien scientists gasp in horror. That's impossible, Cora shrieked. Those frequencies would tear apart any biological system, would they? Nash stood, her form briefly shimming with quantum possibilities. Or did you just assume they would based on your own biological limitations? The main computer system erupted into chaos as Nash's true capabilities became clear. She wasn't just hacking the system, she was interfacing with it directly. Her consciousness extending into the quantum network that controlled the facility. Security override Gamma 09. Cora screamed into her communicator. Initiate total system purge. Yeah, about your security systems, Nash said, not even looking up from her work. Those stopped being yours about 10 minutes after I arrived, right around the time I finished reading your quantum physics textbook. Eric's, despite her terror, couldn't contain her scientific curiosity. You learned advanced quantum mechanics from a basic textbook in 10 minutes. Well, your approach is pretty straightforward once you understand the underlying principles, Nash replied. Though I have to say, your models are missing some fascinating possibilities. Want to see? The quantum core pulsed again, and suddenly, the entire facility was operating on principles that the alien scientists had never even imagined. Systems that should have been incompatible worked in perfect harmony. Energy flowed through paths that should have been impossible. What are you doing to our facility? Cora whispered, all 6 eyes wide with shock. Upgrading it, Nash replied cheerfully. Your quantum architecture was honestly pretty impressive, but it was limited by your understanding of consciousness itself. You never considered that awareness could exist in a quantum state. Taz, his analytical mind racing, suddenly understood. The experiments, our attempts to test human limits, we were never in control, were we? Now you're getting it. Nash's smile widened. Every test, every measurement, every bit of data you thought you were collecting, it was all carefully curated to lead you to exactly the wrong conclusions. The facility's systems had stabilized now, but in configurations that defied the aliens' understanding of physics itself. Nash stood in the center of it all, her presence somehow larger than her physical form, extending through the quantum networks in ways that should have been impossible. See, here's what you missed in your careful study of humanity, Nash explained, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the quantum field itself. We're not just adaptable, we don't just survive. We turn every limitation into an advantage, every barrier into a doorway, every constraint into a new possibility. Cora slumped against a console, her worldview completely shattered. What happens now? Double quotes. Nash's expression softened slightly. Now we have a real conversation about the future, about genuine cooperation instead of attempted exploitation, about what humanity and your species could achieve together if you're willing to stop treating us as test subjects and start treating us as equals. The quantum core pulsed one final time, and suddenly holographic displays filled the room with images from across human space. Achievements, innovations, and possibilities that the alien scientists had never dreamed of. So, Nash said, sitting back down and gesturing to the empty chairs around her. Who's ready for a real scientific discussion? Research log, term research Zenith 9, observation date 7000 to 149.7. The facility buzzed with frantic activity as news spread through the research staff. Aliens rushed through corridors, gathering data, securing specimens, and trying to make sense of their transformed reality. Through it all, Celeste Morgan calmly sipped from a cup of synthesized coffee, watching the chaos with evident satisfaction. The council representatives will arrive within the hour, Taz Brightscale reported, his scales still flickering between patterns of fear and fascination. They're demanding answers about the facility's quantum signature changes. Perfect timing, Nash replied, setting down her cup. The neural network updates should be complete by then. Cora Starwhisper paced nervously, all 6 eyes darting between displays, showing incomprehensible new data patterns. Everything we thought we knew about humans, all our research, our assumptions, were exactly what we wanted you to think, Nash finished. Though I have to admit, the elaborate testing facility was a nice touch, very thorough. Very revealing. Eric's Moonweaver hadn't moved from her research station for hours, frantically analyzing the new data flowing through their systems. But the implications, if humans can naturally interface with quantum systems, if your consciousness can exist in quantum states, then maybe, Nash suggested gently, you should have asked us about our capabilities instead of trying to secretly study our weaknesses. The main doors slid open with a soft hiss, admitting a delegation of high-ranking alien officials. Their ornate robes and neural enhancers marked them as council members, but even their carefully maintained dignity faltered at the sight of their transformed research facility. "What is the meaning of this?" the lead council member demanded, neural tendrils writhing with agitation. "Our sensors detected quantum anomalies that should be physically impossible." Nash stood, her presence somehow filling the room despite her human size. "Actually, that's exactly what we need to discuss. Specifically, your species' habit of underestimating others." The council members recoiled as Nash approached, their neural enhancers detecting something their normal senses couldn't quite grasp. "You see," Nash continued, gesturing at the facility's new configurations, "humanity noticed your little research projects. All of them. The secret facilities, the captured specimens, the weapons development programs. We could have shut them down immediately, but we saw an opportunity." Opportunity? The council leader's neural tendrils twisted in confusion. "To learn about you," Nash explained, "your methods, your technologies, your intentions. Every test you ran on us taught us more about you than it did about humans." Cora suddenly gasped, comprehension dawning in all 6 eyes. "The other facilities, the ones you mentioned, all simultaneously revealing the truth," Nash confirmed. Right about now, screens throughout the facility lit up with transmissions from research stations across 12 star systems. Each showed similar scenes of transformed facilities and stunned alien scientists. "Impossible," the council leader whispered. "The coordination required, the technological integration." "About that," Nash said, smile widening. "Remember how I mentioned quantum consciousness? Well, here's the real kicker. We're all connected. Every human in every one of your facilities working in perfect quantum sync. We've been coordinating since the moment you brought the first of us in for testing." The revelation hit the alien scientists like a physical blow. The implications were staggering. "Your entire species," Eric's breathed. "You're all quantum linked. Only when we choose to be," Nash replied. "It's a relatively new development, something we discovered while pushing our own limits instead of letting others test them." The council members huddled together, neural tendrils intertwining in distress. What do you want?" Nash looked genuinely amused. "We want what we've always wanted. Peaceful cooperation, scientific exchange, mutual growth. We just needed to make sure you understood what that really means." She turned to face the gathered aliens, and for a moment, they saw something vast and incomprehensible behind her human eyes. "Humanity isn't your research participant," she stated firmly. "We're not your research project or your potential strategic tool. We're your neighbors in this galaxy, and it's time you understood what that really means." The quantum core pulsed one final time, and every piece of technology in the facility synchronized to new frequencies that bridged the gap between human and alien consciousness. "Now then," Nash said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with both quantum fields and neural networks, "let's talk about real collaboration, about what we can achieve together when we stop treating each other as specimens and start treating each other as equals." She gestured, and a holographic representation of the galaxy appeared, showing new possibilities that merge human quantum consciousness with alien neural technology. "After all," she concluded, her smile now genuinely warm, "the universe is far too interesting to explore alone, even for a species that can exist in quantum superposition." The aliens stared at their former research participant, finally understanding that they had never been the experimenters at all. They had been part of humanity's test, and they had revealed far more than they had learned. Research log, Lunar Station Beta 459, final entry, date 7249.8. 6 cycles had passed since the revelation that transformed the scientific community's understanding of humanity. The renamed Cooperative Research Station Beta 459 hummed with activity, but now it was the excited buzz of genuine collaboration rather than the nervous energy of secret research. "The latest results from the quantum consciousness studies are fascinating," Eric's Moonweaver announced at the packed conference chamber. Her scales now shimmered with confidence as she presented to a mixed audience of aliens and humans. "Our combined research teams, have identified 37 new applications for merged neural quantum networks. In the front row, Celeste Morgan nodded approvingly. She still maintained her role as human liaison, though everyone now understood she was far more than a simple representative. The Council's new protocols regarding human interaction have been fully implemented, Tuz Brightscale reported, his scales glowing with pride at his recent promotion to Chief of Interspecies Relations. All previous research data has been purged, replaced with accurate, mutually approved information. Cora Starwhisper, now serving as Ethics Director, stood to address the Assembly. Let this be recorded as our final testimony regarding the events that reshaped our understanding. We thought we were studying humanity's limitations. Instead, we learned about our own. The gathered scientists murmured in agreement. The changes hadn't been easy, but they had been necessary. Every assumption they'd held about human capabilities had been systematically dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. Perhaps the most remarkable discovery, Nash commented, rising to join them at the podium, wasn't about human abilities at all. It was about potential specifically, the potential for growth when species work together instead of attempting to dominate each other. She gestured, and the quantum core responded instantly, creating a holographic display that showed the progress of their combined research. Achievements that would have taken centuries to reach alone had been accomplished in mere cycles through genuine cooperation. The irony, Tuz noted, reviewing the data, is that if we'd simply asked for collaboration from the beginning, we would have learned so much more. Fear makes for poor science, Nash agreed. Though I have to admit, watching you all try to quantify human limitations was pretty entertaining. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the alien contingent. They could laugh about it now, but the memory of their miscalculations still stung. The final protocols have been distributed to all research facilities, Cora announced, bringing up the new guidelines. Rule number 1. Never assume you understand the full capabilities of any species, especially humans. Rule number 2, Eric's added with a slight smile. If a human seems too cooperative during testing, they probably are. Nash laughed, the sound carrying harmonic frequencies that made the quantum core pulse in sympathy. My personal favorite is rule number 3. If your research participant starts improving your testing equipment, stop the research immediately. The assembled scientists chuckled, but there was a note of respect in their amusement now. They had learned their lesson well, but perhaps the most important change, Tuz observed, is in how we approach research itself. No more secret facilities, no more unauthorized testing, no more assumptions about species limitations. Speaking of assumptions, Nash said, her expression turning mischievous, should we tell them about the other thing? The real reason I let myself be caught. The alien scientists froze, neural tendrils and scales flickering with sudden anxiety. There's more? Cora asked, all 6 eyes widening. Nash's smile widened. Let's just say that quantum consciousness wasn't the only surprise humanity was keeping in reserve. But that's a revelation for another day when you're ready for it. She stood, addressing the entire assembly. After all, the best scientific discoveries come when both parties are prepared to learn from each other. And humanity has so much more to share once we're confident you can handle it responsibly. The quantum core pulsed one final time, displaying a message that would become the new motto of the Cooperative Research Station. The greatest limitation in science is not in what we study, but in what we think we already know. As the assembled scientists contemplated this wisdom, Nash's form briefly flickered with quantum possibilities, a subtle reminder that humanity's full capabilities remained an intriguing mystery, one that would be revealed through cooperation and mutual respect, not through attempted exploitation. The aliens had learned their lesson about underestimating humans. Now they could only wonder what other surprises their new partners had in store for the future. In the end, the greatest research hadn't been about testing human limits at all. It had been about testing the aliens' capacity to grow beyond their own limitations. And thanks to one very patient human research participant, they had passed just barely.